TRT failure, lost on next steps, failing on TRT. This is not supposed to happen. TRT, low libido after good years. Like what happened there? PCT help. Look at this guy. I want to hop off. Been taking 80 milligrams testosterone Cypionate every other day since January 10th, and so it's been about 3 weeks, and I've decided I want to hop off. What is the best PCT to get testosterone up? People are just having all manner of problems. Listen, if you browse the testosterone subreddit, at 95% of the inquiries of the posts are people that are on TRT having problems. And the most predominant problem is libido problems, sensation problems, erection problems, and climax problems. But if you take the framework that I've been trying to give you guys for years now, high DHT, in-range estradiol, functional testicles, a balanced DHT estradiol axis, and you apply it to all of these situations where seemingly something is wrong, the answer to dialing in is clear and right in front of us. So I want to do something different. I want to go through the Reddit threads. We're going to go deep in the trenches of what people are really experiencing on TRT and examine why they're having problems. Effectively diagnose the issues, keeping my framework as a TRT coach in mind for how to resolve them. I think this is where a lot of folks are going to get a lot of benefit, because we're going to look at these issues. We'll break down the protocols. We'll look at what the problems are and determine why. Whatever you're doing, drop it. Take a chill pill, sit down, relax. Get into this with me, because this is critically important. All right, before we start the video, Cortex Labs, which is my company, is a TRT guidance and sexual dysfunction resolution company. Got a range of different products relative to that. Starting from coaching, look, I'm a coach on TRT, and predominantly what I do, 99% of the inquiries that come through is fix libido and erection problems on TRT. I'll get you dialed in. You can book me for a 3-month, a 6-month package, a single session call. The 3-month and 6-month options are 30% off right now. That is a significant discount. The code is on the screen and down the description. If you need to dial in on Test Cream, which is arguably the best modality of testosterone or for TRT that there is, just get Mastering Testosterone Cream for Libido and Erections. It is a video course of me breaking down only the protocols that work, dispelling all the myths, the BS, giving you the golden rule for TRT for sexual function and much more. Instant download, livecortex.com. Lastly, if you need to get a hold of a vetted list of any anabolic, including DHT, that you can think of, just get Sourceless. Yeah, it's 20% off. Codes on the screen and down the description of this video. All right, so this one, the PCT help one, I want to hop off. So he's running 280 milligrams of Cypionate a week. Already that's going to make you over aromatized. That will cause problems. You'll never dial in that way unless you can use an aromatase inhibitor to get estrogen around 30 or so. So we don't even really know what he was doing. 3 weeks is not long enough to be on a cycle. It's not a cycle anyway. That's basically sports TRT. The cycle is 350 or above, in my opinion. But probably what happened was sexual function went south, right? Because you're on 280 milligrams of testosterone. You have enough DHT. But when estrogen is too high, it's just going to block the effect of DHT. Estrogen has its own erection-reducing ability, right? Particularly at the penile base, but also in the intrapenile nitric oxide signaling dynamic. And somewhat of a blockage of androgenic action in the male organ. For the sake of just trying to fix this guy's protocol, it just move down in a somewhat stepwise fashion. First to 200 a week. Leave it there. Don't do anything. Sexual function is still going to be bad. Then to 150 a week. Sexual function probably still be bad at that point. If you're using HCG, you have too much estrogen at that point. And then work it down to 120. Do every other day injections. Let it stabilize for 6 weeks and see where you are. Ultimately, on long esters, sometimes it can be hard to dial in indefinitely. You go down to where estrogen falls in range. It's like 115 milligrams a week. You're not very anabolic, and you don't even have enough DHT. So you got to add exogenous DHT, or better yet, just switch to cream. Here's one that is somewhat the basis of why people have problems dialing in the sexual function on TRT. It's a thread that's titled Monitor E2 or Not. Conflicting info. And listen, I understand there's a lot of people telling you different things on the web, so it might be a little conflicting, but you've got to get into the research to figure out that there's a serum cutoff in picograms per milliliter. It's actually 32, above which you're a lot more statistically likely to have erectile dysfunction. And there are mechanisms for why that happened. There's so much conflicting info out there about estrogen or E2 on TRT. Some docs like Jordan Grant say when you're on TRT, E2 is going to go up with the injections, then settle back down. Other guys like Cortex Labs dude, that's what he's trying to say, who is everywhere lately, says do everything to keep estrogen under 30. What do you guys think? All right, let's talk about this. Now, I don't want to out anybody, but the idea that E2 is going to go up with injections and then settle back down does not make scientific or biologic sense. That is not true. You are not going to somehow reduce the quantity and the functionality of the aromatase enzymes, nor are the aromatase enzyme encoding genes going to downregulate in response to TRT. If anything, depending on the dose, but especially when you're doing very frequent injections of, above 120, estradiol I have seen in real life on labs actually slowly accumulates. So this notion that estrogen is going to just somehow it's going to go up initially and then, it's going to work its way down or something, considering there's the same amount of substrate for aromatization, meaning tests that can convert to estradiol, is totally bogus. Now, there's a comment that kind of makes sense in the comment section. It goes, treat symptoms and not the numbers. You should have your estradiol sensitive. Let me just make that clear. But sometimes, if it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to continuously get labs, you need to know where you're at. That's why I did the high estrogen versus low estrogen video, so that everybody knows if you're not getting labs, where are you based on the symptoms? You have high estrogen, you have low estrogen. I mean, there are clear characteristics for both those states. He said, it's something to keep a general eye on, i.e., estradiol, but not something to worry about. Well, I think you should certainly worry about it. If you're starting to have itchy nipples, limp, moody, crying at movies, then your estrogen is probably a little too high. Don't take AIs preemptively either. Wait until there are symptoms or issues. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to aromatase inhibitors, you don't want to be haphazard about it, but if they're necessary, they are necessary. But he makes an interesting point regarding itchy nipples, but mostly having a limp male organ. That's a sign of elevated estradiol. What this roots from is there are actually clinics, believe it or not, that don't monitor estrogen. They don't test it within their user base, and that is irresponsible. You've got guys not just with elevated hematocrit, blood pressure, significant water retention, but also sexual dysfunction. If your patient has erectile dysfunction on your protocol, you're doing it wrong and it's irresponsible. Here's one where a guy is just generally confused about all this works. Remember, part of what is the golden rule of TRT is high DHT, in-range estradiol, but functional testicles. You seldom find a person that doesn't take HCG that has great sexual function. Somebody just asked me on the live stream, are there people that you've worked with over the years that sexual function is good if they don't take HCG? And my answer to that was no. Guy goes, at 100 milligrams every 7 days, the peak of testosterone in nanograms per deciliter is 800. I had improved brain fog and well-being, no real change in libido. At the end of the week, I was crashing too low and fog was returning. Then he moves up in dose. He goes to 120 milligrams a week every 7 days, and now the peak is 1250. Doesn't feel much different than when I was at 800, but I don't crash at the end of the week, but I still have low libido. He mentions that erections don't come, here, let me move this up a little bit, as quickly. I have to do lots of foreplay unlike before, right? Lots of getting, that indicates on the brain libido side of things, the dopamine axis is not firing correctly, which always is as a result of either elevated estrogen, entirely too much DHT versus estrogen, or non-functional testicles. Remember, the progesterone of the DHEA, the intratesticular test, DHT, estradiol, its effects on the limbic system, that's what controls your libido. And I would simply say in this case, with a peak of 800 nanograms per deciliter, estrogen is probably reasonable. But without functional testicles and the intratesticular hormone cascade that plays a major role in sexual function for us as natties, do we think we can just shut down some organ system? The seminal vesicles, the vas deferens, the testicles, the DHT, the 5-alpha reductase that's in there? You can't, man. Seldom do you find someone that takes it no HCG and they've got good sexual function. People are confused. The gel, test gel. Let me just be not the first to say, but to reinforce, testosterone gel sucks, boys. Okay, gel is not the same thing as cream. You don't want to be using androgel or testim or any of this stuff. You can't dial in clearly that way. I mean, it is almost impossible to control the variables on test gel. It might as well be injections. It's just transdermal. but it's not as DHT converting and as rapidly permeable as rubbing cream on the scrotum. It's just not the same thing. Guys, total test around 692. Okay, at 6.92, it's probably 692 nanograms per deciliter, but estradiol is 73, right? The whole problem with this guy is saying my things have, life has improved, my energy probably, just a lot of things have improved. Libido is still shit. Yeah, libido is not going to fire with estrogen at 73. If estrogen is too high to block DHT's influence on primal libido, you're just not going to have it. Listen, boys, the sexual system for men has to be tightly balanced in a very narrow, controlled window of elevated DHT, not necessarily above range, but 60 to 90 nanograms per deciliter, and estrogen between 20 and 35 picograms per milliliter max. You think that there are other aspects of physiology that when they're thrown out of whack are going to function well? Let's take nootropics as an example, something that I used to be really into. If you take loads of citicoline, which is a building block for acetylcholine and does some modulation to dopamine receptors, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be loopy, you're going to have brain fog, you're going to have memory issues, which is the contrary to what should happen when you're optimizing the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, and that's via mechanisms probably of the increase in acetylcholine esterase, which clears choline from the synapses because you've already got too much of it via the citicoline that you're taking. It's out of balance, and you have side effects as a result of that. I dealt with this in the nootropic sphere. Folks would just think they could load up on nootropics and do it haphazardly. That's what I built a career on, surgically dialing people in with nootropics because I know how the brain works and everything has to be in a balanced state. So to assume that you could have like high normal test, but estrogen at 73, dude, you're not going to have libido. The classic libido says yes, Johnson says no. I mean, for the first comment that got 76 upvotes says everything. High estrogen says yes. Yeah, there's a range. It's usually 35, 45, even 50 picograms per milliliter estradiol, where your libido is going to be pretty okay. Yeah, you're going to want to have sex. But because estrogen is blocking DHT's effect and having its own negative effect at the base of the penis, which is in the scientific literature, which, by the way, I am just perplexed why people haven't read that, or they have and they're just not admitting it, you're going to have ED, dude. Here's a perfect case in point. A perfect case in point for everything that I've been saying. Solved my libido and ED issues. Spoilers, it was E2. Let's break this down for a second. So if you check my post from a couple weeks ago, you'll see my issues. But basically, I've been taking 300 milligrams of Testosterone, a blend of different esters, for the past 10 months or so. In the last 2 months, my libido tanked and I started getting ED. Man, estrogen, especially at the tissue level where it just accumulates and accumulates and accumulates, it finally did its damage. Some folks, these are the folks that are disillusioned into thinking estrogen doesn't need to be managed. It might be fine at 50 for a couple months. Yeah, but once at the tissues, it starts warping functionality, right? Disrupting endothelial function, reducing nitric oxide signaling, and stopping the inflow of blood through the base of the male penis, you're going to have erectile dysfunction. Here's an interesting thing. E2 and prolactin were technically in range, but on the higher end of the range. This I see in TRT coaching all the time, right? You're at 30 picograms per milliliter. Things are all right, not so great. Libido's not good. It's passable. But once you get down to 22 picograms per milliliter, suddenly you're a teenager again in terms of sexual function. Started taking Arimidex on jab days. I don't suggest that. I suggest you give it a day and let the estrogen build up a little bit and then take it on the next day and drop my test to 170 milligrams a week. All right, so that's significant. He did two things. He took an AI to get the estrogen down, and he dropped the test, which creates less substrate for aromatization. Started taking Cialis 5 milligrams a day and cabergoline once a week for the past 2 weeks. The cab is not doing anything in this case for prolactin's in range. Recent bloods, 80 picomolars per liter, so that's lower on the range, but still within range. And morning wood is back. Daily boners are back. I feel way better. Libido is back, and my blood pressure is somewhat better. Yeah, it was estradiol, man. I mean, how many times do I have to say it to people so that there isn't threads like that other one before, which said E2, manage it, monitor it. I'm confused because there's conflicting info. Please, everybody, please just listen to me. Now check this one out. Here, a little bit of a different one. No morning wood, no erections, no energy, no libido. This guy is screwed, dude. Total test, 900 or so, I guess, depending on the dose. Free test, high, normal, estradiol, 33. 33 picograms per milliliter. Things should be good, but let's figure out why. Current protocol, 120 milligrams test E, split twice a week, so 60 milligrams every 3.5 days. 0.25 milligrams of anastrozole once a week on the first shot day. Tried switching to gel, nothing. Anyone have any idea why I'm open to questions? So first of all, I don't see any HCG in here, so that's probably why. If you are nuking estrogen or blocking aromatase with an aromatase inhibitor, and you have non-functional testicles, I mean, that E2 at the tissue level is going to be cooked. You could have 33 at the serum, but guess where aromatase inhibitors work? In the brain, in the penis, the cardiac muscle, and joint tissue. They work systemically at the tissue level. The simple solution to this problem, he's on 120 a week at this point, would be add 100 IU of HCG every day subcutaneously. Keep the 120 a week, but change it to daily injections, whatever that is. What's that? 16 milligrams a day, 15.5 milligrams a day. Do nothing for 6 straight weeks, then rerun bloods. When estradiol is in range, I'm sure all the problems will be solved. If it's above range, which it looks like as he takes anastrozole to get it down, it probably will be above range. Well, that's the indication that you need a protocol overhaul. You either need to go down to 100 milligrams a week, the 100 IU of HCG, do nothing for 6 weeks, run the blood, see if things resolve. If E2 is in range, but DHT is lukewarm and sexual function is not great, you need to get that DHT up, either exogenous DHT, a hybrid with a pump of 100 milligram cream on the scrotum every day or every other day. And if you can't make that work, this is a perfect candidate for cream. Just move to cream. Start at the 100 milligram per milliliter stuff, start with 5 clicks a day, all on the scrotum, and then adjust from there. Taking into account some people might need to rub some on the forearm, some on the scrotum, just to get the perfect DHT estrogen axis ratio. And then you're dialed in. Check this guy out. I switched to testosterone cream daily to get a massive rise in DHT, which turned my libido around completely. Maybe get your DHT level checked. Yeah, I mean, at this level, he's probably got pretty good DHT because it's 120 a test a week, and he's got a anastrozole blocking the estrogen, so it's going to convert more to DHT, but it still isn't enough. If there isn't functional testicles too, you're not going to be dialed in, man. This is actually a perfect case for cream. Those of you just spinning your wheels on Cypionate, trying everything. Yeah, I created a course to dial it in, but it's notoriously more difficult to dial in than cream. Just go on cream. You're going to have a hell of a lot better of a chance of dialing in that way, especially if you follow the instructions I've given in this channel. On the other end of the spectrum, people think of me as the guy that's like, control estrogen, it shouldn't be over range. And all that stuff is true, but at the same time, I'm willing to look at both sides. If you crush estrogen at the gene expression level, at the receptor level, and antagonizing the receptors as Masteron would do, too much, it's going to kill your libido and your erection quality. 120 milligrams testosterone, 1,000 IU HCG. Now, that's enough HCG to hopefully offset that, but it doesn't appear as if it does. E2 was at 55. Feeling fine until I decided to add Masteron for more libido. So you weren't fine. You didn't have great libido. Probably had erectile dysfunction to some extent, and added 120 milligrams Masteron 3 weeks ago, a 1-1 ratio. Yeah, this is why I don't suggest the 1-1 ratio. Case in point, brothers. 3 weeks in, and it fucked my libido and erections. I wanted to add it because E2 is slightly elevated. Any tips on how I can lower it to 60 milligrams or just leave it? Yeah, I mean, at 120 milligrams Masteron, if that's happening, have it. Run 60 milligrams Masteron once a week. See where you end up. If you can't get the Masteron to balance estrogen in a way which doesn't nuke libido, but keeps you in a great place, you got to remove the Masteron. Go down in dose ultimately. Reduce that H. You don't need 1,000 IU of HCG a week. You definitely don't need that. 700 is the minimum effective dose. 100 IU per day. Get the estrogen at 27, the DHT above 55, and you're good. And if you can't manage to situate your protocol where that happens in this case, move to cream. The bottom line is, as you see, like these situations in which people have sexual dysfunction on TRT, it's all fixable. And none of them are applying the golden rule. Elevated DHT, estrogen in the sweet spot range, 20 to 35, usually in the middle of that range, with functional testicles. None of them, literally none of them. The answer to dialing in on TRT is so simple, and it is so clearly in front of us that it's absurd that there are people that aren't dialed in out there. But you got the wrong information. And sometimes, even if you have the right information, it can be tricky to maneuver the doses, maneuver the HCG, maneuver the frequency, the application sites of cream, as I discussed yesterday, to get you in the perfect zone. We need to be in a narrow band, boys. We need to have hormone homeostasis, sex hormone homeostasis at optimal levels. That's where you've got ragers, sensation, libido, and climax. And you're anabolic and you feel energized, and it's awesome. That is what I do. That's what we do on this channel, and that's what I do. Look, boys, right now coaching is 30% off. That is the 3-month and the 6-month packages. If you're spinning your wheels on TRT and specifically having libido and erection issues, I will solve it. There are things in my business that I hire specialists for. So number one, I don't have the time. And number two, I'm not the specialist on. And I'd rather just pay money to get it done rather than continuing to spin my wheels and waste time, because time is money. Listen, we will solve the erection issues. We will solve the libido issues, the sensation issues, the climax issues. And right now you can book me for a 3-month or a 6-month ongoing one-on-one coaching package where I'm devising your protocol, making adjustments, communicating with you thoroughly, tracking your protocol, taking notes, engineering good sexual function. It's 30% off. Both those packages are 30% off. If you need a single session consult, 30-minute call, 3 to 5 clear action routes, online documents so you can just go ahead with your life and no hand holding and no long coaching cycles, just book the single session blueprint consult, livecortex.com. If you want to go at it alone, totally cool. Sometimes you need ancillaries for that. You might need actual DHT, injectable DHT, transdermal DHT, Proviron, Masteron, Primabond. There's so many tools that are available to us. They're all on source list. Go grab it. It is 20% off. Code's on the screen and down the description of this video. Those of you trying to dial in on cream, just get the instructional video course. I mean, this is the God course, which shows you that most of the information that you're learning out there is wrong, including 200 milligram cream. That is the fastest way to not dial in. All right, get this course. It will show you how to fix libido and erection issues and dial into the T on arguably the best TRT modality there is, testosterone cream. It's 20% off. Code's on the screen and down the description of this video. My brothers, it has been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you. I hope that you've gotten some good information from this video. Please like the video. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. We are just trying to tell the algorithm to send this information out to other people. Like that Reddit guy said, I'm everywhere. I want to continue to be everywhere. Sub to the channel. If you're new here, listen, I will not bullshit you. I will give you the truth about dialing in sexual function and otherwise on TRT. That is why I exist on YouTube. I'd love to have you on board. Otherwise, kick ass, rock on, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you boys on the next one.